We're going to talk a little bit about the specification of a muscle fiber or a skeletal muscle cell. So let's start with we'll have our skeletal muscle cell here. Okay, so on the outside we have our plasma membrane, or as we call it, the sarcolemma. Okay, so this is the plasma membrane of a skeletal muscle cell. And just like any other cell, what's on the plasma membrane is different depending on its function, right? They're going to have different proteins, different lipids, but the main protein I want to make sure that you guys are familiar with is we have receptors for acetylcholine, which I'm just going to abbreviate as ACH, right? So acetylcholine is going to be the neurotransmitter that can activate our skeletal muscle fiber. There are other receptors, there are other transporters, right? I don't want you to think that there's only these, right? Because we're going to need lots of other things like glucose and whatnot to get through the cell. But one of the big things is that we're going to see an abundance of these acetylcholine receptors. So that way when a neuron comes, right, our little neuron, and it's a cholinergic one, meaning it releases acetylcholine, we can actually activate this skeletal muscle fiber. So how it does it, right? So we have my acetylcholine receptor and it can activate my skeletal muscle fiber. And how it does that, right, is by creating a graded potential. And these graded potentials eventually add up, just like we see in neurons, into an action potential. So that action potential can allow for us to change the activity inside my skeletal muscle fiber. But remember, skeletal muscle fibers are huge. They're massive. They go the length of that muscle. So it's not like this neuron can go all the way through and just activate that one small region. We need to be able to activate the whole muscle. So what our skeletal muscle fibers have are some specializations of the endoplasmic reticulum in a few ways that allows for it to send this signal further. So one of the special things we have that goes along the length of my skeletal muscle fiber are what are called T-tubules. And these T-tubules, I think of them as electrical wiring, and they allow that action potential to go through. So that action potential can go through. And they're ultimately going to reach the ER. The ER in my muscle fiber is referred to as the sarcoplasmic reticulum. And I want to point out it is a regular endoplasmic reticulum, but it's specialized for this function, right? So it's kind of a smooth ER because it doesn't have ribosomes, it's not synthesizing protein. What it is it contains lots and lots of calcium. And this calcium, just like we saw in the chemical synapse, right? When an action potential gets to this area, we have voltage-gated channels that allow for the calcium to be released, and that will ultimately lead to muscle contraction, which we'll talk about in another video. Now, we don't want to lose all of our calcium, right? We want to make sure we have some extra calcium. So we do have these little pockets on the edge that are full of calcium, just lots and lots and lots of calcium. These are referred to as our terminal cisternae, okay, which are just pockets that hold on to lots of extra calcium that we can later share with the SR or the sarcoplasmic reticulum or use for other purposes. But we mostly are going to store our calcium here, and the calcium is going to be moving in and out of the regular aspect of the sarcoplasmic reticulum. So those are the main, and then what I kind of failed to show here, right, where that calcium is being released is the main contractile unit of my skeletal muscle fiber, okay, which is referred to as the sarcomere. And we'll break down aspects of the sarcomere in a different video. But I wanted to show you, right, in the sarcomere, it's a specialized organization of my cytoskeleton. So it's a cytoskeletal feature, and that we have, and they are going to be made primarily of these microfilaments. Okay. So we have our thin microfilaments that are on the edge here. And then the motor protein for these microfilaments is going to be myosin. And it's organized, and these myosins are organized in a special way in these skeletal muscle fibers so that they make these thick filaments. So we've got the microfilaments as the thin filaments. And then this collection of myosin proteins are going to create the thick filaments. And there's a lot more that we see in a skeletal muscle, right? We still have a lot of the same organelles you see in other ones, but I wanted to make sure that we touched on these ones before we moved on into how a muscle cell contracts.